on this episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
If you're able to take a break from the stressors in life and you don't feel better, then that very likely could be on the spectrum of depression, even more so if it's multiple areas of your life that are affected. That's definitely a sign of depression, not burnout. But we can't really ever seem to look ahead. We can't seem to focus on how what we're doing right now relates to a life enhancement or life improvement in the future. And what's more, when everything else stops working in regards to finding meaning in what you're doing, using the future you or the future life situations or whatever it is as motivation seems to really work for a lot of people. There's a weird side effect that happens when suffering becomes content. Because when burnout becomes a brand, it starts to subtly teach people that burnout is an identity instead of a season. It turns into something you stay inside of instead of something you actively work through.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, episode number 516. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston. Thank you so much for being with us today. Folks, I'm going to apologize right from the get-go. I got a cough drop in my mouth. Just trying to fight this little cold or something I've been having. And I apologize if I make some weird noises with the old cough drop. But I'm really excited about today's episode. Weirdly, it's not a topic I actually love. And this episode's going to be about burnout. And one of the things is I do kind of script out or at least bullet point some of the talking points that I want to discuss on each episode. And this one, well, at least when I'm doing the monologues, I don't always do that for the ones that I have interviews, but this one I haven't quite fleshed out all the way. My train of thought sometimes kind of goes off the rails. And so hopefully by the end of this makes a lot of sense. And I want to tackle kind of like the big issue for me. So the big issue is I'm really tired of seeing topics on burnout. Like I'm burned out on burnout. And quite frankly, I think it's just not that cool to see people pushing this idea of burnout on everybody. Like everyone's an expert. Like, oh, you must be burnt out. You must be burnt out. Anytime someone says like, I'm exhausted or I'm tired or, show other signs of burnout or symptoms. At the same time, I think I'm kind of burnt out. And so I think that we've all kind of been in this boat at one point in our career. Some of you are probably in it exactly right now as this episode's launching. Some of you guys probably just got through it. Some of you guys are, will be going through it in the future. So I guess on this episode, I just wanted to share some things I've ventured into the past several weeks. But before that, a quick update on the new co-hosts search. Yeah, I emphasized the S on that one, just so you know, there's 2 more people coming. It was a few weeks ago, I think, that I gave the last update. And I think at that point we had finalized the 10 candidates that made it to the last round. And since then, the committee has completed all of the interviews of those 10. They completed the scoring and submitted that. And from what I understand, it was a really tough decision. Those top choices were all kind of within a few points of each other. And I believe the contracts are being completed and jobs are being offered. And I think that maybe on next week's episode, or maybe it's the week after that, we will be able to announce who the new choices are. So no contracts yet, no signatures on these contracts, but I know that we're really close. And, whoever ends up being, according to the scores, it was really good. It's just going to be awesomeness for your ears, hopefully for many, many years to come. But okay, so for this episode, so let's get into the burnout thing. One of the reasons that this is on the brain for me is because that one thing where you see something once, you take notice of it, and then all of a sudden you see it kind of everywhere. It's known as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, and probably more accurately, the frequency illusion. Anyway, for a while right after COVID, this is kind of like what happened for me. Right then, as things were starting to quiet down a bit, people were going back to work. It felt like the crazy popular topic across all industries, and dentistry, of course, was no different, was the topic of burnout. And by and large, people were forced to stop working during the pandemic for an extended period of time for many, and forced to stay at home. And those acts also forced some perspective on people. So as the topic got hot, lots of people used it as a way to kind of launch their, speaking and writing careers, becoming experts, I guess, in the field. Then after a couple of years, it seemed like that topic was less and less present at the dental meetings and the conferences, and yes, even on this podcast, until you just don't really see it anywhere anymore. So much so, actually, that I had forgotten about that topic as I was trying to schedule the last several shows. What I want to talk about, it just didn't make it to my registry. Then, similar to that frequency illusion scenario, I just kept seeing it everywhere again. And of course, I wanted to blame it on the algorithm. It's like I'm scrolling and I see something on Burnout. Someone else is speaking on, it's going to be at this conference. But no, it wasn't even that. It was on a random billboard on the way to the grocery store. Or, I take a flight and the ads for the in-flight movie on the plane had something about burnout. It was kind of everywhere, like in real life, not just my online life. And I was like, oh man, is this making a comeback? And I don't know if it is or if it isn't. And I just, because it is hitting me right now, I thought I'd take a chance to talk about this particular topic. I want to talk about some things that have helped me kind of, I don't want to say solve, because I don't know that burnout is necessarily solvable, because I think it's always on the doorstep for many people, but maybe stave off or, push it off a little bit. That might be a little bit more accurate, but a chance to talk about these things and also just random thoughts on the topic in general. And I think a good place to start is always the symptoms of burnout. Though I want to talk about it maybe from what I've experienced and what I understand. So burnout is more of you're so dang overwhelmed with a particular task that you're just exhausted all the time. And that exhaustion or that feeling of exhaustion can sometimes lead to a secondary symptom, which can be irritation or frustration or other things. And it manifests in different ways for different people, I think, just kind of depending on maybe who you are. And that's how I understand it. And I think that understanding is probably basically holds up. But the common denominator to define burnout is really when things are taking off your plate, when you've had a chance to rest and you do your recovery things, then the symptoms subside. And I saw a thing from Mental Health America, and I'll put a link in the show notes for you to look through if you have some time. But they talked about how people often confuse depression with burnout. Because if you're able to take a break from the stressors in life and you don't feel better, then that very likely could be on the spectrum of depression. Even more so if it's multiple areas of your life that are affected. That's definitely a sign of depression, not burnout. And so on the link that I'll put in the show notes, they have a free tool that you can use to see if it's depression or burnout and kind of what you can do from there. And then for me, when I keep hearing people describe their situations, most of them actually do feel like depression symptoms and not so much burnout. But if it's truly, truly burnout, let's talk about that for a minute. I spent about 10 minutes in prepping for this, trying to remember who it was exactly that I had seen this video. It was on my Instagram feed. And on my feed, I have motivational speakers, thought leaders doing TED Talks or whatever. Of course, Filipino food and travel, and comedians. It is a very small group of people that make it to my feed. And I don't think it was the comedians or it wasn't, food or travel. So I'm going to attribute this, and I could be wrong, and I couldn't find the video. So if someone has it, please let me know. But I'm going to attribute this to someone that Rachel Wall turned me on to named Dan Martell. Again, I could be wrong. I'll apologize if this is the wrong attribution. But he was talking about how we don't ever seem to be burned out by the things that we love doing. He also said that when we don't have purpose in the overall project or the job, then the task for that job or project will burn us out. You get what I'm saying there? It's not that you might be burned out because you're seeing patients all day, every day. You're burned out when you've lost your purpose or your why for wanting to see those patients every day. And this translates to when people who are burned out start to see hygiene in a completely different way. They all of a sudden change their whole attitude about going into the office. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but let's jump back first to the idea of this, task versus purpose thing, because I think there's a lot of confusion here. Tasks are things that you do every day. Purpose is the reason those tasks mean something. So you can be overwhelmed by tasks, but still be energized by purpose. And you can have fairly reasonable tasks, but feel completely drained if you've lost that purpose. And this shows up in dentistry all the time. When someone says, I'm burned out from seeing patients, sometimes what they really mean is, I no longer feel connected to why this matters. And that's a completely different problem. Because if this was about the workload, then the solution would always be fewer days, fewer patients, and more breaks in the schedules, right? Like that's the solution. But we all know people who work crazy schedules, and I was one of them, like especially early in my career. I love just load up the schedules, double book me, I don't care. And they still feel fulfilled. And we know people who work light schedules, maybe they see 4 or 5 patients a day, and they feel completely drained, completely empty. So the workload alone isn't the full story. When purpose disappears, everything feels heavier. Small annoyances feel ginormous. Patients feel like obstacles instead of the human beings that they are. And even good days feel meh, very flat. And that's not a time off problem. That's a meaning problem. No amount of vacationing is going to get rid of that. So the solution for this is finding that burnout buster, that thing that injects a sense of meaning and purpose back into work. And for me, you've heard me talk about this on the podcast before, it's dental mission trips. If I have time, I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But for others, it can be as simple as finding something new within your scope of practice and leaning deeper into that. I don't know if you've ever had this, but I've had lots of dental hygiene acquaintances tell me that they took a course on something new. And let's, for this instance, say, I don't know, oral systemic connection. Then all of a sudden, they're talking about it nonstop. And they tell you or they tell their patients every new thing that they've read or learned or whatever. And they went from just being at the office seeing patients to really engaging with them. And maybe it's not oral systemic. Maybe it's something like local anesthesia. That was something, again, that worked for me. Maybe it's a new leadership role, whether it's within organized dentistry or whether it's within the office, or it could even be something outside of the dental profession altogether. It could be about airway. It could be any of those things or any other types of things. And they take it, and then all of a sudden they have a drive to be at the office, and they're intervening on their patients' behalf more than they ever did. And it happens all of the time. Another interesting thing I noticed is that burnout often happens because I think this is a human flaw. I don't know if this is specifically a professional flaw, but we can't really ever seem to look ahead. We can't seem to focus on how what we're doing right now relates to a life enhancement or life improvement in the future. And what's more, when everything else stops working in regards to finding meaning in what you're doing, using the future you or the future life situations or whatever it is as motivation seems to really work for a lot of people. I saw a Nikola Tesla quote recently, and I looked it back up for this episode. It says, "Let the future tell the truth and evaluate each one according to his work and accomplishments. The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine." So let's run through that a little bit, because I think quotes like this can take on a literal meaning from the author who wrote it in the moment that was in maybe response to something else. And then we can use the same words and use it and maybe in a different context. And I think what the original quote is meant to mean is that someone shouldn't be too worried about, getting their flowers right now for the work that they're currently doing. Because if their work is good enough, there's going to be a bigger recognition of accomplishment when the work stands the test of time. And that while others might be getting their fame and fortune right now and or seeking that right now, the work that you do or the work that we all do should last forever. And that's going to be the accomplishment. So when you think in terms like that, it's really hard not to be engaged. And being engaged cancels out the burnout. Because if we're thinking, hey, this is the future that we're, I'm not really sure what the future is going to hold, but I know it's going to be better than this. So let's work hard and do our best job. That's going to give us energy or the desire to be even better and to stay engaged. Another interesting idea is that burnout is somehow consistent with stages in life, and that knowing that this can be true will give you a bit of self-awareness. And then when you have that self-awareness of, I just got to get to the next stage, that in and of itself can help stave off that burnout effect. And at the same time, it helps you seek the specific help that you need with the problems that you're having in that current stage. Okay, so I didn't explain that very well, but this is what I mean. So, for example, a brand new hygienist isn't going to burn out the same way that a 15-year vet, does. So early in our career, burnout's going to sound like, I'm overwhelmed. My work isn't good enough. I'm scared that people don't think my work is good enough. The office is moving at a pace that's like way too fast. I can't seem to catch up. I don't want to make anyone disappointed in my work or in me. And while those things are often termed as burnout, it's actually imposter syndrome. And then kind of mixed in there, I guess, is just pressure that everyone feels when they're learning something new, and just the hardship of learning curves. And then, mid-career, burnout can often sound like, I'm stuck in my career. I'm just going through the motions. I'm on autopilot. I'm bored, those types of terms. And while that is often termed as burnout, that's actually feeling like just exhaustion, but maybe not even exhaustion. It's actually like stagnation. Like we're just stagnant in our career. It's not really, really burnout, but you can tell that it kind of is because we've lost the passion for it. And then late career burnout often sounds like, I'm tired of being the one that does everything all the time. Like I'm the go-to for everything. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being, the person everyone comes to for, mentoring and have to, teach the new person all the time. I'm tired of being the person that has to fix the compressors when they go down. I don't know what it is, but and these things never change. So again, this is stagnation. Like these things are easily fixable. And it might not actually be true burnout. It might be something else. We often throw out that blanket advice like, oh, you're burned out, just go take a break or whatever. But we're often missing the correct vocabulary needed to fix the issues that are happening to us. We can't get better until we know the real problems. And so sometimes using the blanket statements of, hey, you're burned out, like that's not really contributing to overcoming the issue. And then that whole thing of like, hey, go take a break. Like you're burned out, go take a break. Like I have some thoughts on that too. And this one might be a little bit uncomfortable to hear. I think that phrase is just really bad advice. Like we can't rest our way through life. Rest is a tool. It's not a strategy, right? So when we're fatigued, rest is going to fix fatigue, but it's not going to automatically fix someone who's disengaged or, quote unquote, bored. Because you can take a week off, you can take 2 weeks off, you can go on the best vacation of your life. And if the core issue is lack of purpose, lack of growth, lack of alignment to the philosophies of whatever you're doing, while you might feel physically better, you're still going to feel empty mentally when you come back. And it's going to hit you day one. It's not going to be, after some time, then it starts to wear on you again. No, it's pretty much going to be like, right away. In fact, sometimes taking a break actually makes things worse because now you've tasted freedom again. And the contrast is even sharper. Like when you went away for a little bit from all of those things, and then you came back to essentially the same, that contrast is a killer. And it's like what I mentioned at the very beginning of all of this. When people were forced to stay home during the pandemic, you would think that everyone would come back to the offices, and not necessarily dental offices, but like, everyone's workplaces with all of this energy. And we saw things like quiet quitting happening all of the time. People, that contrast was stark. And so sometimes people don't need to work less. They just need different work. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have a different career or they have to be out of dental hygiene. It's a scope change. And sometimes they don't need that rest. They need a challenge. Sometimes they don't need to escape. They need a path for progress. And all of that is okay. None of that means that you're broken. It just means that something in the system, internal, external, whatever, just needs recalibration. One of the things that started to bother me a lot as I saw, burnout, that term burnout creeping up everywhere, is that burnout itself has kind of turned into a brand. And it's kind of disgusting in a way for me. And I don't want this to come off as an attack because it's not everyone who makes a brand out of burnout who is at fault here. I know people really need help in this area. And sometimes the wrong buzzword term attracts the people who don't know exactly what they are experiencing, right? So if they think that it's burnout and it's really depression, it kind of doesn't really matter as long as they're going to get help, is kind of how I look at it sometimes. Getting them to any sort of a program, I think, is super helpful. But at the same time, when we went from burnout being something that people were kind of quietly struggling with to something that gets like thumbnail tiles, speaking stages, coaching programs, and entire Instagram accounts, for crying out loud, TikTok accounts. And again, some of that awareness is good, and some of these programs are great. But there's a weird side effect that happens when suffering becomes content. Because when burnout becomes a brand, it starts to subtly teach people that burnout is an identity instead of a season. It turns into something you stay inside of instead of something you actively work through. And then what happens is everything starts getting labeled as burnout. Oh, you're tired? Burnout. Oh, you're frustrated with your schedule? Burnout. You're bored with your job? Burnout. You've had 2 hard weeks in a row, heaven forbid. Burnout, right? And I just don't think that that's very helpful. Sometimes you're not burned out. Sometimes you're just human and life is hard and can be heavy for a stretch. Sometimes you're just in a frustrating season. Sometimes you're just dealing with a bad system, a bad manager, a bad workflow, a bad coworker. I don't know. But it's not a broken career. When burnout becomes the default explanation, we skip past problem solving and jump straight to like exit planning. And that's risky. Because now instead of saying, what needs to change? What else can we do? We jump to, all right, we just need to quit. And then the next thing is something else is going to get hard. Like the next step gets hard. And then we have to quit that too, until our identity is a victim and a quitter. And that's not good for anyone's personal sense of worth. Talk about mental health disorders. I think this could be crippling for someone who is struggling with mental health disorders. So I guess my advice out there for everyone is just like, be really, really careful when you dive too deep into being labeled as having burnout or chronic burnout or all of these things. There might be something else going on. And I'm going to end this episode with this. I really wanted to go deeper into my thoughts on dental mission trips in this episode, and we're short of time. So I'm not going to. I definitely have some thoughts about them, and they're on some past episodes. You can go search those ones up. But finding time to give back, to serve others, and use my dental education at the same time really helped bridge that gap for me. So when I went back to the office, I would have positive feelings about dentistry again because I used dentistry for good. It saved me, I don't know how many times over the years, of feeling, kind of that burnout, which for me was losing my sense of purpose and doing, the monotonous part of the job. I didn't like going in and just having, same all the time. And so I had to get away and do something different, but it was still dentistry, essentially the same exact job, just a different setting. And then realizing like I was really helping people. I would go to these places that people had never seen a dentist before and provide, even if temporary, relief and prevention, albeit again, limited prevention of, further destruction of their periodontium. We have an amazing profession when you want to see it. And I need you all to know and believe that. MIT News did a report in 2024, and in it said that the U.S. Census Bureau tracks the listed job descriptions that respondents provided for every census, and each decade's job index lists about 35,000 occupations. We are one of 35,000 occupations. And when you see these lists of, the best jobs or best careers in the U.S., and go ahead and, take a minute and Google it right now if you want, where does our profession land? I mean, you don't even have to say, how popular is dental hygiene. Just say, give me the list and scroll down, and you're going to find it within a few scrolls. The U.S. News reported that we are number 28 in the list of top 100 jobs. You all know this to be true. We are always in the top 100 jobs, usually top 50, if not top 30. So we're number 28 in the U.S. News out of 35,000 possible occupations. Statistically, unbelievable that so many hygienists claim to be burned out when we have it so good. So it really sounds to me like there's more to the story. And I would say yes. Again, I'm not a mental health professional, but that it likely involves depression and anxiety issues more than true burnout. And for me, again, I would like to see less chit chat on burnout and more chit chat on depression and anxiety. Let's call the problems what they really are and really start helping each other out. Thanks for listening to this episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for the few things that I mentioned that we talked about in the episode, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks. All right, listeners, that is our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to reach out to all of our guests. Give us a follow on social media. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you have a minute, head over to our website and sign up for our newsletter. All right, we'll see you on the next one. This has been a production of Endeavor Business Media, a division of Endeavor B2B.